Welcome, everybody. We are live. We are here on something that's been quite some time, and I apologize. This is something I've wanted to do on the show for a very, very long time, and that's to interview some of the greats that are in the gaming business, the gaming world that we occupy on Twitter and YouTube so often and discuss. And tonight's guest will not disappoint. He's probably one of my favorite critics on Twitter and on, I believe he does some YouTube, but we'll find out. I want to say to everybody, thanks for being here. Please do retweet it out. Let everybody know that we're here today. And also, guys, I did something. I went ahead and made memberships for the channel. If you would look right above the description, there's a join button there. If you will become a Mooch Maniac and support the channel, it's much appreciated. You also have some great emotes that were made by the great Sean LeBray. He made very, very custom Mooch screaming emotes, which there'll be little screaming tonight because it's an interview. But nonetheless, let me say this before any more time goes by. I want to get the great Paul Tassi in here. Paul, I want to say welcome to the show, first and foremost. Thanks for being here. And I got to be honest with you, we've been talking back and forth for probably about now a couple of weeks, Paul. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show and taking some time out of your schedule to be here. How are things, and what are you playing these days?
Thanks for having me. Things are good. I'm playing a lot of Destiny now that the new Season of Dawn launched, and I have been playing the new Borderlands DLC, which I cannot talk about until Thursday, but that's been most of my time right now.
So it's going to be my job to crack that case wide open. We'll see if we can get something out of Paul. Listen, so as everyone kind of shuffles in, please do, guys, tweet it out. Let everybody know that we are here with the great Paul Tassi. Paul, let me ask you a question here. First and foremost, this is just something for me personally, because, listen, my ship has sailed, okay? My ship has completely sailed. I can't get into the world you're in. I'm just happy being me here on this small little channel, okay? And here's the thing. How did you get into games journalism? I mean, really, like, from infancy, right? Is it out of high school? Was it out of college? Was it somebody just gave you a small opportunity, you bit, and it took off? Before we get into games and the industry and the business and all the questions I'm dying to ask you, how is it you kind of stumble into game journalism?
Yeah, it's a pretty random story. I feel like most of these things probably are with people who get into the business. Way back, I'd say all the way back in college is when I first kind of started to get into writing. I was an economics major, which I hated, and I do not remember any economics now. But I worked for the school paper at my college, and I was the film editor there. And so I did like movie reviews and stuff. And this is like way, way back in 2008. And that was like when blogging was like really just kind of started taking off in full, where you could just instantly publish something on the internet. And I was kind of fascinated with that.
Yeah.
So while I was working the school paper, I got hired to write like a college blog on campus. And so just about like student life and stuff like that. And then that ended up turning into my full-time job. Once I graduated, they hired me to kind of like run the Midwest college region.
Okay.
While I was in there, I started my own site with a buddy of mine who was consulting on that college site. And that was called Unreality, and it covered movies and TV and video games. So I kind of branched into all three of those there. And that was just kind of something on the side that I was doing until the actual site I worked for ran out of venture capital money. So that just collapsed within the first year, as most of those sites tended to. Right. And then, but at that point, my work had got me noticed. Just one random article I wrote about, they were making a Hot Wheels movie, and I wrote like a 250-word article about it. And this new startup called True Slant saw it, and they thought it was funny, and they were trying to hire a network of writers to come and write for them. And so I came in and interviewed, and I pitched to write about video games. About a year later, that site was bought by Forbes.
Really?
And
okay.
That was 9 years ago as of October. So I thought I might get cut because I figured that was kind of the end once they got bought out. But
yeah,
people like gaming, and gaming is pretty popular and it's a big business. So Forbes kept me on, and I have been writing there ever since.
Well, I like that last part you just said there because gaming really has picked up way more. And Paul, this is not even though this is going to be a "This Is Your Life" segment. This is not going to be a "How old are you?" But I mean, you've been gaming for a while. I've been gaming for a while, and you got to remember that if you go back even a decade, I'll say as short as a decade, maybe as long as 15 years ago, you're talking about we used to have to be like, "Hey, Paul, do you game?" Me too. Oh, yeah. Shh, keep it down, will you? Keep it down. Now, I mean, people are walking around, they're wearing gaming T-shirts, they're bragging about it. When I go home, I can't wait to play some. And, listen, a lot of people in the hardcore industry, what do we say? We make fun of the Call of Duty guys. Listen, I got news for you. I don't care what you game. I don't care if you like Fortnite. I don't care if you like Call of Duty. Coming from where we came from, Paul, this is a big deal. Like now this is a 2 billion plus population market. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that Forbes kept not only you on, but kept that market and kept that division, and it's growing. I thought it was interesting when I saw the Wall Street Journal and Forbes taking up gaming articles. That to me didn't just necessarily seem like a normal thing when it used to just be like the same mundane news. You know what I mean? Just news. It would be politics, this, that, the other. To see that there's a gaming section in Forbes, that's something to me that just, I don't know, for some reason it drew me to it. So, I mean, you must have been taken early on by surprise. Now it's just, tomorrow's just another day at work. But I mean, realistically speaking, do you think that like Forbes will continue holding on to their game sector and continue this kind of coverage in depth that they're allowing you to do?
I hope so.
Well, yeah,
if not, I'm out of luck. I mean, it's not just me now. I'd say there's me and two other guys who write probably about as much as me. Yeah. And then we have maybe 7 or 8 other guys and girls who write about games. So it's a 10 plus person section at this point. Gaming is one of the biggest sections on Forbes, just in terms of pure views, because of how many people are searching for it. So it's almost impossible to ignore at this point. Like all these big sites now have gaming sections because you kind of have to. Like it's an industry that's bigger than movies and television and music in some instances combined. So it's impossible to ignore. It's a fundamental part of culture itself, in addition to being, loaded with money and stuff. So if you're not covering it, I'd say the question is, why are you not covering it rather than why are you covering it?
Absolutely. And that's actually well said. I do want to take a quick second to say thank you to Biggie2316. Shout out to Biggie, who's also a member of the channel. He says, just letting everybody know the super chat works. Thank you, Biggie. I appreciate that. Paul, let's get right into it here. I'm just, myself personally, I know the audience may be clamoring for this, but I'm as excited to interview you as I think the audience is to hear this interview. Where do you think we're going as far as next generation goes? I mean, look at how we've already kind of put a fork in the road here, and we're seeing things like Game Pass, okay? We're seeing things back in 2013 like digitally acquiring games was a no-no, and now it's a must-have or a must-way of procuring. My point being is that we've made so many different changes. We've gone from power to resolution, to games qualities, to acquiring game studios. You've seen such a vast change in 7 years. What's your take? I would say, and again, you're going to kind of have to shuffle your thoughts here because there's a lot to take in. But you see where Microsoft's going, you see where Sony's going, and you see how Nintendo is staying, even though they're stepping a little bit out of their comfort zone. Nintendo's still staying quite traditional. That all being said, what is your take? And I want to get into your article that you put out, but I don't want to get into that article quite yet from the other day about price, and that'll kind of fall into place. But do you think Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, who do you think maybe has the advantage as far as the way the future's laying the cards out for gaming as we move forward?
I mean, there's a lot of tech to kind of consider when you talk about a question like this. Like there's virtual reality, there is game streaming in the cloud. There's, just powerful consoles and powerful PCs like we always have. There's portability with mobile and things like the Switch. So there's so many facets. It's almost hard to concentrate on just one. I would say what stands out to me the most as like the most logical, effective thing that is solving a problem, in my opinion, has been Xbox Game Pass. Okay. Where that is the thing. I'm not even like a big, I have all the consoles, so I'm not just like in Xbox's corner. Right. But Game Pass stands out to me as something that is actually filling a hole in the market, whereas something like VR is cool, but it's not really solving a problem. Like normal video
Okay.
games like aren't bad. We don't need like VR to fix games per se, but it does kind of suck to keep paying, $60, $40 and like going to GameStop as a pawn shop so you can afford your next game and stuff. So when you have a system that's just a relatively low cost subscription fee for an increasingly large amount of games, that's something that stands out to me as pretty significant. And if I had to guess about kind of next gen, I think you're going to have to see Sony come up with some sort of answer to that, like past kind of what they do now with their current offerings. And I think they're a little hesitant about that. But to me, if I had to pick one thing, Game Pass seems like kind of more of the future, whether or not it's like xCloud streaming or things like that. Like just the existence of the subscription model in general, I think is a pretty important thing going forward.
Well, I have something that I want to add to that, Paul. And I'm going to add my 2 cents, and then I'm going to hit you with a question here. And shout out to the Ash and Luca. That's my New York. She says, "Hey, Paul, fan of the Rageless Roundtable. Cool to see you on with my Italian M&M. Have a great show, fellas." Luca, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. But here's the thing. So Game Pass is by far it's probably the biggest game changer of this generation going into the next. But when you say Sony's going to have to step up, do you think what Sony's doing right now with PS Now, and what they're doing is they're allotting some of their bigger titles, okay? Like we just saw announcements today, like Horizon Zero Dawn going into PS Now for roughly about 4 months. We saw that they allowed God of War, Uncharted in for limited time and a year plus in certain instances where it's already been out to the masses. Sony right now, do they need to be in red alert mode right now? They're the market leader. They're probably going to walk into next generation already starting off as the market leader. Do you think it's enough for PS Now with what they're doing right now, where they're saying, okay, listen, we're going to have Spider-Man 2. We're going to have God of War 5, if you will, or however you want to designate it. We're going to have those games go into PS Now 6 months, 12 months, 18 months after our big red carpet release. We heard Jim Ryan speak these words. Do you see what I'm saying? I think that Microsoft was in a position where they had gotten beat this generation 2-1, and now they're kind of looking at it like this. We've got to get our name out there. We've got to reach the casual market. How do we do that? We see the subscription-based services are working with Disney+, Hulu, ESPN+, okay, Netflix. Maybe this is our calling card. So I think Microsoft did the right thing. But my question comes back to you, just for a more in-depth look into it. Does Sony need to react like that now?
No, I think you're right. I do not think they need to react now because, as you said, they dominated Xbox this generation. So why would you really try to go and upset the apple cart
exactly
if they're already in this good of a position? And like Sony already has a very huge, strong stable of first-party IPs that are kind of must-haves, and they want to keep it that way. And in theory, they want to keep selling those as new $60 titles for as long as they can. Xbox, meanwhile, obviously has struggled with first-party IPs this generation, but now they've committed to making every new first-party release be on Game Pass too, and on PC and like kind of accessible everywhere. It could be the case where if they start producing better first-party IPs, and I think we do kind of see them on that trajectory to a certain extent with some more recent releases, that could get more and more valuable. There's no reason for Sony to just like dive off a cliff right at launch and do that. Like if Xbox is really just, getting all these Game Pass subscriptions and like it's just dwarfing PS Now, that might be something they consider, a year after launch or something like that. But considering how handily they won last generation and how strong their first party stable still is, it's probably not something that they need to just jump into right away. No.
Well, another big thing that you kind of discuss in and out on Twitter, and I see your articles constantly, is that you're not always just critiquing a game or sometimes you're looking at services, Paul. And one of the things that you mention a lot of times when something comes out, and I think and listen, I read as much as I can of your work, but I got to be honest with you, like Disney Plus comes out, and everybody goes, well, if Disney Plus can do it, and Netflix can do it, gosh darn it, Xbox can do it. And I say, maybe. The reason being is that you look at the model that's going on right now. Everything has gone to a subscription base, right? We've already always had our heat bill, our mortgage, your house insurance, right? Your phone bill, all these other bills have always come in a monthly fashion, right? Now we've put our entertainment into a monthly fashion or a monthly payment plan. I have a lot of my friends that are casuals. And let's keep in mind, Paul, and this is my opinion, you could tell me I'm wrong. A lot of my friends that are casual gamers, they don't play nearly the amount of games that we play, okay? Same thing with the chat. The chat listening right now, you are all dedicated. I'm just saying we're all hardcore. I say to them all the time, you've got 200 games, $10 a month. And they're like, no, sorry. I buy my Call of Duty once a year, or I buy my NBA 2K, or I buy my Madden. Yes, you're right. For $10 a month, I'm getting all those games, but I really just play that one game. That's the audience that I think Microsoft's trying to chip at. And the thing about it is in a lot of your critiques and a lot of things that you've written, you've always said this is a good value for you, the customer, or it's not. The thing is my take on this is Game Pass is it is an absolutely tremendous value for the hardcore. Because, I mean, myself personally, I'm buying everything Microsoft put out. So for me, now I'm saving money. But for that individual, I'm using the casual term here, but that individual that bought one title, maybe even two titles, and none of them were actually Microsoft's first party, they may not feel that waiting to see if a title lands in there is going to warrant their $10 a month, on top of all the other entertainment we have, right? Monthly Disney Plus, Hulu, this, that. I mean, people were so excited to cut the cord back in the day, and what they did was they went from a $65 to $85 cable bill. Now they're doing $110 a month a la carte. So do you think that this is a model that Microsoft can start to wean in a little bit easier to the casual market? Because the hardcore's already sold. That's the 10 million projected people in Game Pass are us. You know, the folks that listen and tune in every day and have our ear to the ground. That's where I think the difficult part for Microsoft, their PR, their advertising, their marketing department, that's the hard reach. I mean, as far as that goes, you don't see that being a problem to tack another $10. And let's not forget, too, Paul, we're talking Ultimate Edition is $14.99. So, that's starting to get costly, in my personal opinion, for the casual, not the hardcore. That's my take.
I guess my counterpoint to that would be like, okay, so if that doesn't appeal to the casual, like, but I don't understand how the current system would appeal more to the casual. So, like, okay, if you're the guy who buys Madden and Call of Duty a year,
right? Like,
how is the current system where all games are $60, new, or $40 used or whatever? Like, how is that appealing to you as casual either? Like, I feel like the subscription, because all in all, the subscription's like $120, $150 a year, which is the cost of like 2 or 3 full price games, but you're getting access to a whole wealth of different things. I get, like, if you are that person who just wants to play Call of Duty every year, like, I guess I can understand how a subscription wouldn't be for you, but that's kind of like asking someone, who watches like Downton Abbey and that's it, and that's like their only show, like they're not going to subscribe to Netflix. So you're kind of going to miss that market either way, and this seems like a better way to at least entice them to try it, especially if you give them a free trial or give them, a discount for the initial period or something.
And that's what they're doing, right, Paul? There's a dollar for 3 months or et cetera, et cetera. There's been a bunch of deals from Microsoft.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to kind of wean people into it, and I think it's a better option for people than be like, oh, I don't know, this game's like $8 at GameStop. I might as well, try it and see how it is, because that's how the current or the old system worked, and I don't think that was particularly attractive to casual players either.
So, I mean, going forward and moving into next generation, as we go, all right, now we're talking about, there's a lot of new buzzwords, Paul. I can't wait to see your articles on them, right? Ray tracing. I hope you're doing your homework on ray tracing, right?
I don't know nearly enough about ray tracing as I should.
It's okay. You've got some time to bone up on it.
I know my computer can't do it. That's about it.
So we're talking about ray tracing. We're talking about it in the hardware sense, possibly in the Series X. We're talking about it possibly just on the software end. Rumors is all rumor, folks, on the PS5. But then I've watched a lot of tech folks that dabble in PC gaming exclusively, Paul, talking about even if it is on the hardware side on either console, it'll be used in better It'll be better utilized for whatever that is, shading and lighting, etc., and reflection and shadows. But it's still, even with next generation around the corner, they feel that what the hardware will entail in these boxes, it still wouldn't be able to put out a lot of the examples we're seeing that are done on high-end PCs. So if we kind of remove ray tracing for a second and we look at where we're going here, do you think that like Microsoft has the leg up? I mean, is Game Pass their golden bullet to try and penetrate what Sony has built in this unbelievable like coat of armor this generation? Is this because, I mean, let's be honest, we're probably talking about, and I hated to bring it in so quickly, but let's discuss it, Paul. We're talking about, in my personal opinion, a $600 price tag on these boxes. And right, and I mean, I don't really see how, unless a company wants to take a hit, and I don't think either one's in the mood to take a hit personally.
I think Microsoft could be willing to, and I think Sony could be willing to, just to screw over Microsoft. But I don't know if they both kind of shake hands and agree that, hey, this console generation is just suddenly going to be $600, like maybe, but man, that's a risky proposition, I think.
Well, I mean, all in all, when it comes down to it, what do you think the pricing will be? I mean, this is your educated guess. Nobody's holding you to it.
I think they will both be $500. That may end up being a bit of a hit, but I think everyone has seen what happens when you try to launch a console at $600, and that has not gone well. I think that Microsoft is going to want to play it safe by not coming out with a console that is, at the very least, probably going to be $100 more than its competition again, which is what happened with Xbox One versus PS4. And I think you're going to see a lot of people balk at that. I know there's all these rumors about like a lower spec, cheaper version of the console that could be coming out too, but that's a whole other can of worms. And I would be concerned kind of if they came out with a lower tier version.
If they do come out with a lower tier, though, Paul, let's be honest, who's that market for? That's where I kind of scratch my head. You're going to lose the hardcore. I don't understand that
either,
right?
Like, if you're going to do that, you might as well just keep your Xbox One X, especially if all the stuff is going to be like allegedly backward and forward compatible. So I don't really understand who that was for. Like when they were talking about like, oh, it's going to be a diskless thing and that'll take $50 off of it, I would buy that if the specs were the same. Like, right. I don't care about a disk drive. I haven't used a disk in like 5 years, so that would be fine. But if they start knocking down the specs and stuff and make it, make some $400 box, I don't really understand who the market for that is. Because if you're the guy who wants to buy the newest and greatest console at launch, like, why are you going to buy the cheaper one that is already outpaced by something that exists on the market? So that I've never understood that. And they're not talking about, at least publicly, they're not talking about another tier coming out at launch. But I don't know. I guess we don't know what the future holds.
Well, I mean, the other thing that I want to kind of bring, a lot of people, they kind of jump to conclusions. Everyone's looking at all the sales flyers that are out there on Twitter right now. But let's not forget, Paul, you are talking about the Xbox One X is still retailing. Okay, the retail price, not the sale price. There's a lot of sale prices right now for $329, $349, including Jedi Fallen Order, etc. We've seen all those, right? I think even the Gears 5 custom one, if it's still out there, is on sale. It's the holidays. But it's still retail price is $499.99. So if you've got the X still holding the $500 tag, and you've got all of this like unbelievable hardware packed into that new Series X, Microsoft would have to be taking $100 to almost $200 cut to keep it at that level. I mean, do you see where I'm coming from with this? I mean, they had the X at $499, unless they were absolutely cleaning house on that. I mean, that may be the case.
I'm willing to bet by fall it'll be at least $100 cheaper than that. I wouldn't be surprised to see that knocked down to $400 or $350, and then for a $500 console launch. Okay. That's what I could see happening. But again, like, I understand all the talk about the tech in the box and how much it costs and stuff, but on the development side, we also know that they're doing all sorts of, newfangled stuff that isn't necessarily found in existing PCs. So I don't know if these one-to-one comparisons of cost and power and all that are necessarily, the same thing. Like, you could say this piece costs this and this piece costs this, and you add them together, and like, how are they going to make a profit? But these are just enormous megacorps, and they kind of have their ways. So either A, they can figure out a way to get stuff cheaper, or they can just be willing to take a hit for as long as it takes. I think Microsoft, especially because Microsoft's way bigger than Sony, obviously, and they want to get back in the game. So I think they would be more willing to take a hit to try and undercut Sony while being the same or better power, just to try and change the narrative about the console race just from the beginning this time, as opposed to what happened
Microsoft is just one of the richest companies in the world. So this next comment that I make, it's a question more than anything. Okay, I mean, listen, right now you've got Halo 5, which is probably hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into the R&D, the creation, the labor, you fill in the blanks. You've got Gears of War 5, Gears 5, if you will, that probably was somewhere around $75 to $100 million to produce, market, etc. They're giving away Game Pass for $1. I mean, people have paid $1, $2, $5 to play Gears 5. So Microsoft's already taking a hit there. Then they're taking a hit on other parts of their infrastructure business, and now they're going to take. Now we say hypothetically they'll take another hit for $150 off of their next one to retain the price of $499. At some point, even when you know what wealthy companies like to do, Paul, they like to make more money. So it's not they don't want to take the loss. Every listen, my point is this: whether you're a grocery store or you're Microsoft, every company has a loss leader, right? So I get that. But how many times can we say they're going to take a hit in a certain division before they've got to actually, put the actual price tag of what makes them their money back? Investors only care about that. So
I mean, they've been making bank on Xbox Live for a zillion years.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of their biggest things. And I remember back when you were having this debate about the consoles, is Microsoft going to make Xbox Live free to compete with PlayStation? And what happened? PlayStation made a paid service.
Went the other way. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was essentially printing money for them. And I think the ultimate goal is if you start getting people paying an automatic, $120, $150 for Game Pass, there's really no reason. If you're dedicated enough to buy a new Xbox, there's no reason not to also have Game Pass. It is
absolutely.
They're kind of painting it as close to as essential to the system. Back when they were saying Xbox and Kinect, they're married to each other, and that was a big joke.
It's the peanut butter Xbox and jelly of gaming at this point. There's no way you can't.
But yeah, Xbox and Game Pass, that is a combination where it would be very strange to have just an Xbox without that at this point if you're planning on playing more than 2 games a year.
Okay, so Paul, let me just say this, because if you see on the topics line, I have your article, and I paraphrase. This wasn't exactly it, but basically you said an iPhone can cost $999, but an Xbox Series X cannot cost $600. And I'm asking you this, and you've mentioned part of it, but your article got more into it. The question is why? Why is it that we're okay every year and a half, 2 years, shelling out $1,000 for, and you know what, listen, don't get me wrong, I don't blame you using, I'm an iPhone, I'm a Steve Jobs fan. We miss you, Steve. My point being is this, okay? I got to say, I have no problem shelling out that for an iPhone myself personally, but I also, and I've talked to a lot of hardcore. If it's $600, Paul, and I'm getting my money's worth, and it truly is that power crown that they're discussing and we're hearing rumors about, I don't have a problem with that either. But is that a me problem? What was your take in the article on why that would just be an absolute disaster?
I think there's a lot of different factors here, and I think it's easy to say I personally would pay $600 for a Series X. Me personally, I would pay $600 for it because I think that would be totally worth it. But I think you have to look at the broader context of these markets, and you have to look at the history of different overpriced consoles, overpriced for the general market, failing or struggling at launch or to take off and stuff like that at the beginning. Whereas iPhones, the price of phones has been so high for so long. It's not a shock to hear about a $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 phone anymore. It's just how it is. Another part of this is how these things are paid for, where a lot of not that you can't finance an Xbox, but a lot of people who are buying new consoles are usually plunking that down up front. Whereas an iPhone, you can get a discounted iPhone, you can get, a free phone, you can just lump it into your payments over the next 3 years or whatever. And there's all these different ways where you're not just shelling out $1,000 right, at the AT&T store or whatever. Mm-hmm. And there are fewer options for that for a game console that isn't just a credit card, or I think they're starting what's it called, Xbox All In or something, where you can kind of do that.
I believe it's is it all access, or is it all?
Is it? I can't remember.
Maybe it's all in. Yeah, you're right. It could be.
Yeah, and so they're starting that. So maybe that's how prices creep up eventually. The point of that is just the main thing is like you have to look at the two different markets right now, and between the context of a $600 console failing like, a generation and a half ago, and Xbox really floundering last time when they ended up being $100 more than their competition.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things add up to like me just saying it can't cost that much because there's too many factors working against it. Like it can, in the sense that I will buy it, like maybe it is worth that much, and yet in the broader context of the market, I am having a hard time believing that would be the case, unless I guess Sony also just matches it, and then it's kind of a duopoly, and it's like, well, if you want a new gen console, you got to pay that, or you got to buy an even more expensive gaming PC, and those are your only options.
Well,
so
we're going to run into the same situation again, Paul, which this is where I give Microsoft a ton of credit, is they consistently go in this case now, a full day before Sony at E3. And that's when prices will be discussed and flaunted. So if Microsoft comes out, they know that they're going to set a bar. And then, if they do happen to be gutsy and if they go with a $599 tag, Sony might decide to do, like you say, an undercut and pull the rug out from under them, and they'll lose the 100 to look like the hero again. But if myself personally, this could be my own opinion, I think that if Microsoft comes in at $499, I think that Sony will match. I don't see how they have to either be the same or Sony will be a little bit cheaper. And that may be because of the contents in the box, or it may be like that marketing jab. Because let me tell you something, my personal opinion, and I'm going to get to the super chats in a second. My personal opinion on 2013 was when Microsoft launched and they had their price and they had the Kinect in the box. Listen, I have no hard evidence on this, Paul. Maybe you could set me straight. But in all honesty, I think that Sony was also planning on putting their camera in the box. And when they saw that it was an absolute catastrophe for Microsoft on stage with that price, I think they yanked the camera and they lowered the price. I mean, really, I think it was, and it's a genius reaction move. It is, but I think it was a reaction move. I think they both planned on doing that. You could see that they had commands. They had their own camera already made, but they decided to box it separately after the fact. So I think that Sony will have that 24 hours to react to Microsoft's stage presence and what they pitch. But I don't think the hardcore would be as anti-$599 as the number sounds, because when you're relating to 600 was a catastrophe, that was the PS3 launch. That was a long time ago. And $600 back then, I'm not saying it's not a lot, but it's not as shocking. I think 600 back then would be equivalent to like an 800 price tag now. Or you did the math, didn't you?
It's 750.
750, okay.
So yeah, I talk about that too, where I agree, and like comparatively, it doesn't sound like as much, all these years later. However, the video game industry like gives no shits about price inflation. Like games have cost $60 new forever. Yes. And if anything, they're getting cheaper because they have to compete with free-to-play models and mobile games and stuff. So I don't really know if you can use like the inflation argument in that sense, because the gaming industry has never really been reflective of inflation like other markets have been. So I get that point, but I don't know if that's enough of a convincing argument for me.
Well, let me read these super chats, and I have a question for you on microtransactions in case I forget my train of thought here. LMNOPO, shout out to you, buddy, and thank you so much for being here tonight. He says, if the layman customer walks into a store and sees $100 less on the Xbox that looks like the same as the 500 plus model, I'm pretty sure they choose the cheaper model for the kid to save a few bucks. It's a basic consumer psyche, which I agree with that. I completely agree with that. And then shout out to Punk Kiddish. Punk, thanks for being here tonight. He says a little something for my man Mooch. Cool guest tonight. Yes, he is. He's great. Shout out to Wilmy Hood. I see Wilmy in there. Wilmy's another great member of the channel. But my point being is, just like you said, the gaming industry, Paul, doesn't care. They don't care about inflation and other things like that, and the cost of minimum wages going up tremendously in every state, et cetera, et cetera. But that's why when microtransactions became, and Paul, listen, I'm not going to quote you. I'm not going to quote you because I don't have them written down and I don't remember. But I know that you have spoke at length at times, I believe, on microtransactions. I personally, unless it was a pay-to-win model, I never had a problem with it, because these devs, these publishers, they got to make their money somewhere. We've had a $59.99 new release tag on these games for well over a decade. So, like you said, things go up. If people want to buy different skins and hats and and different emotes or emojis, different things in the games. You know this better than anything with Destiny. You see them; they're all over the place. In what is it? There,
Eververse.
Eververse. They're all over the place. So you can buy everything, and sometimes I'm a little jealous when I see somebody who has a better animation than I do in the game. What's your take on that? I mean, do you think that microtransactions? I notice it hasn't been quite the talking point anymore. I think people have relinquished that, and I also think developers have released the pay-to-win scale, and it's more of just a cosmetic at this time.
Yeah, I think it's simultaneously become kind of more accepted. Like, unless you're Jim Sterling and like you're going to go after like until the end of time, just because it's against your core philosophy. Like most gamers at this point have come to accept some level of microtransactions in games, and the reason this has been kind of helped along is because most developers realized that they had kind of started pushing things too far. And I think it was maybe like two or 3 years ago when we got to the peak, and I almost might cite Battlefront 2 as the peak, which ironically it never even happened because they got yanked before launch. But that was the kind of culmination of like the ultimate. It was like loot boxes and pay to win in one package. And like it was such a backlash before the game even came out that they had to pull it down and revamp the whole game. And like the game's actually pretty good now, but it took like 2 years to fix it. And so I think once these companies got away from, and not all of them have, there's still some things like this, but you don't see loot boxes in every new release now like you used to. And if a game does have a loot box type mechanic in it, it's almost news at this point where it's like, whoa, they're really still trying to do that. That said, even cosmetic microtransactions, like generally speaking, I don't have an issue with them. It's just, it depends on the context of the game. Like I think it's one thing if you have Fortnite is a free to play game, you have really expensive skins that you can or cannot buy. They don't really have anything to do with the game. The point of the game isn't to get skins, it's to win and just play.
Right.
But then you can run into trouble with a model like Destiny, where Destiny is a game all about loot. And then suddenly, if every season you have the best looking sets that are in the Eververse store and they're really encouraging you to buy them, then it's like, okay, well, even if these are cosmetic, like the point of the game is to get cool looking armor and stuff for some people at least.
Right.
So if you're selling that, so that's where it's still kind of a gray area for a lot of people, but I think you're right in that it has been generally more accepted, and it is what has helped in part keep prices down all this time, because they figured out, I mean, for a while it was like subscriptions and stuff, and then it was DLC, and now it's more microtransaction focused, where you kind of have a mix of everything to a certain extent, but it's why games are still $60 and getting cheaper. So
now, what do you think about the change that's happened? I don't really have this as a topic. I'm hearing where we're going here, and you see that Phil is now kind of he has full reign. He's always had it since about 2014, but this next box is everything from him from birth all the way to the grave. This is going to take him through his career here. And, you see the moves that they've made. What do you think about all the change-ups? Because a lot of people talk about this. We talk about this week in and week out on a lot of podcasts. What is the change-ups that Sony's made with their Worldwide Studios chairman change, Jim Ryan taking the place of Sean Layden, Yoshida taking I'm going to say a lateral over to indie development and acquiring indie studios, which, by the way, I think is a fantastic idea because his relationships out there are bar none. What is it you actually think that Sony's, it's drastic, right? I mean, right as soon as Jim Ryan takes over, PS Now, right? Price drops. First party games go in from PS4. There's more talk about the interaction with Microsoft Azure that they're going to be using. Do you see this as like a major shakeup, or is this Sony just catching up with the times?
I think it's kind of them catching up with the times, because I think they're looking ahead and they can see some stuff that they are going to need to be involved in to some extent. And a lot of that is, the cloud-based stuff that they can't really do on their own without a partner like Microsoft or someone else. It's kind of ironic that it is Microsoft, considering, they've been such close rivals in the space.
Right.
I don't think we'll really know until, we get fully into the generation, but they're ending the generation strong with all these sales, with all these good games. And if that just, runs off a cliff or something as a result of these changes, then that's one thing. But I don't think we have any reason yet to believe that's going to happen. And if the biggest changes we're seeing are things like, PS Now price reduction or like putting first party games in the system, like that's fine. That's probably a good idea. So I haven't really, other than like a bunch of people leaving or moving around, which could be a red flag, I haven't seen really any red flags as a result of this yet, unless I'm missing something obvious.
Well, not at all. And that's the thing. I and initially, you got to understand, when I started paying attention more to the actual industry, which I came into it probably well after you did, my point being is that when we saw like Jack Tretton step down at the very beginning of the PS4. Very beginning, and he was beloved in the industry. So when you lost someone like a Jack Tretton early on, that I thought was much more alarming than when Sean Layden kind of either retired or was asked to step down. No one's really sure yet. Until Sean or Jim Ryan writes a book, we won't know. But Jim coming in, and to be honest with you, if I'm Microsoft, I kind of like Sean Layden, I think, a little bit more. Sean and Phil had a relationship. Jim Ryan's a little bit more cutthroat. You can see he's already made a couple of public statements where he's like, we're giving our first party the red carpet treatment. This is how we're moving forward. We're going to stand the course. Our dedications to first party games. We understand single player is our bread and butter. At the same time, we do want to venture into the multiplayer space. And that's something that's kind of been going back and forth here for quite some time as well, is Sony's focus has been on what? Single player games. And Microsoft has always been multiplayer games, which, let's be honest, Paul, even though we're sitting here saying that Game Pass is going to be the next greatest thing, Game Pass may have the Hellblade 2s in there and a few other games, but majority of games are being structured towards games as a service. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it depends on how these things are going to be priced out. But yeah, I mean, more and more big franchises are going games as service to a certain extent. A lot of them are keeping, the $60 price tag up front as well, but a lot of them aren't too. So it's, you are going to see more of that. It's just a matter of, you might end up with an EA subscription and a new Ubisoft subscription and all this stuff. So it's exactly kind of like the streaming space, where if you want to play everything, or just like you want to watch everything, you're going to get kind of piecemealed to death, and it might not end up being any cheaper than it was before. But that's a problem we're seeing with the streaming space kind of in general, now that there's so many more iterations of it.
Well, now here's something I didn't see you tweet about, Paul, and shame on you, if you will. Right now, I was expecting you to go off in one way or the other, good or bad.
Which thing?
The Game Awards. I'm going to tell you my 2 cents, and then I got to hear yours. I've watched every single one that Jeff Keighley's been in charge of. This was the best one. I mean, it was the best one. I've been very critical year in and year out of all of these award ceremonies. I thought this one had some sort of functionality and flow, and I thought the guests were decent. I thought the music was decent. I thought the orchestra was fantastic. And then we're going to get into a little bit of the winner and loser of Game of the Year. But what was your take of the overall show? I mean, what's your take on the Game Awards first and foremost? And you
didn't see my 90 tweet live.
I missed it. I said shame. Well, then shame on me.
To be fair, I didn't write an actual article about it. I just did the nominees and the winners, I think. But
okay.
Yeah. So one of my first ever events I went to back when I was first starting out was the VGX Awards. Back when it was on Spike, and it was still Keighley doing it. But it was like the very weird Spike version where. Yes. I was literally on the red carpet, and it was fun to see a bunch of celebrities I'd never seen in real life before. And yet I was like, what are all these weird random celebrities doing here? And that was kind of, at that point, I don't know if that was the last year of it or something, but then eventually Keighley kind of realized he needed to dress it up a lot and make it, less focused on celebrity cameos and stunts, and more just a high quality, collection of game stuff. And I think he has improved pretty much every single year. I think the show is gotten continually better and better. And, I don't know if there was as many big, moments for me in this one, where last year, I think you had the guy, he was crying when he gave his speech. And then there was Sonic Fox, who was awesome. And I don't know if I saw quite as many of those moments, but overall, I thought the show was excellent, and it is an interesting blend of awards and trailers and stuff in a way you don't really see a lot of places. And then the Xbox reveal was a total surprise, and that really lends itself to how big these have gotten, where it is essentially like winter E3 now. And frankly, I thought it did almost everything better than E3. Like E3 has more stuff in it. It has more stuff in it just for sheer volume, but in terms of the actual like distilled quality of it, I think the Game Awards wins there.
Well, let me ask you this. Here's something, guys. Everyone in the chat, you're in for a doozy because we've got Paul here. And Paul, the only time I'll put you on the hot seat, I swear, the whole show. Like, what's going on with leaks? Like, how is it that Microsoft was able to reveal that and nobody knew about it? Or you could tell us now, right? It's Monday Morning Quarterback. Did somebody know and they really did keep it under hush? Or because, like, let's be honest, even when you talk about E3 2017, when we got the Xbox One X reveal, it was the one and only Jeff Keighley that broke, right? Before Microsoft gets to go on stage and present this thing that they're so proud of, Jeff Keighley breaks the $4.99 price tag on it. So
I totally forgot about that.
Oh God, yeah, which is great. I mean, to be honest with you, it's just the hardest industry to keep a secret. You know this, Paul. I mean, come on, your phone. Like, good thing you don't have to pay per text. I wouldn't want to pay your text message bill. Okay, I mean that thing's got to be going off like mad. What's the deal with that? I mean, did you hear anything? Was there anything kind of, hey, Paul, don't write about this because it's really, really low key. Nobody knows if it's true, but Microsoft's going to do something today. You had to have heard something.
I heard nothing.
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 How does Forbes hear nothing?
I mean, I'm not like as much of an industry super insider as you might think. Like, I'm not Jason Schreier. Like, I didn't even see him hinting at it. Like, he usually will at least hint at something if it's going down. But I did not hear anything. I heard nothing being passed around about it. I am sure they kept that circle as small as they possibly could. Like, it wasn't like there was a stage presentation. It was just they kind of slotted in a video for the most part. So it wasn't like a whole big thing. So that may have been easier to keep a secret. But no, right. I was genuinely amazed that didn't leak because everything leaks now. And like Game Awards had a couple leaks, but generally speaking, it was a pretty tight ship this time around. So I don't know if he like figured out where the leaks were coming from or something and made some changes, or
they had to.
Or what happened? But yeah, I was impressed. I mean, with the Microsoft thing, but I was just impressed generally about how almost nothing leaked from the show.
That absolutely. I mean, you're sitting there and you're in the business. I mean, myself personally, if I worked for Forbes, I'd have that almost like a badge. I'd be like, I work for Forbes. Get out of the way. I need to know something. I mean, I don't understand, right? I got to be honest. It doesn't
work that often.
I know it doesn't work that way. But I mean, nonetheless, I think that this has been an industry where, you go back, I want to go even back further, 15 years, 20 years. Everything was in print. There was websites, things like that going on 20 years ago. But like it wasn't this mass run to get the first headline, I don't want to use the word clickbait at all, but the first, like, you know what I mean? I mean, you know what it is, Paul. And you don't dabble in that. That's not your bag. But I mean,
that's not what I hear.
It's not. It's not. You've always. Well, I think you've. And listen, it's not because you're a guest on the show. To be honest with you, I mean, it's true. I always check out what you say, and then I read the article. That's the thing, though. How many people do you argue with, Paul, on a day-to-day basis where you're like, did you read the article? Right? I mean, that's got to be your number one.
There's an old journalist joke where it's just a tombstone and it says, "I addressed that in the piece." is your last words. But right? Yeah, I think there's a difference between writing an interesting title that people want to click on and then writing clickbait. Clickbait to me implies something misleading. Like I'm saying one thing and the opposite thing is true. Like if I'm saying something that might upset you in a headline, but I go on to explain it in detail, I would not consider that clickbait personally.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's the thing. I mean, when it comes to the Game Awards, though, I've got to ask you. Now, myself personally, I'm just about 55 hours in on chapter 6 or 7 of Death Stranding. And listen, I like it. Okay, I'm also not going to sit here and if you don't like it, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're supposed to like it. That's not my place. But I will say this much. There was a lot of controversy around what was going on with Kojima and Jeff and their friendship and things of that nature, leading to believe that, of course, Death Stranding was going to win Game of the Year. First of all, did you think it was going to win Game of the Year? Second of all, what did you think of the pick in Sekiro?
I wouldn't have been surprised if it won Game of the Year, but not because I thought like Keeley was going to rig it to be Game of the Year. Like,
Exactly,
I thought if it had that many nominations, clearly it's a nominating committee. It's not just Keeley picking things. So if enough people had nominated it for, you know, the most awards or whatever, it stood to reason. It had a pretty good shot of potentially winning Game of the Year. I once Kojima won Best Director, I was like, oh, then maybe it won't win, because it's like the Oscars, where sometimes they'll separate those. Like, they'll give a director an Oscar, but not the movie.
It happened last year, too, if you think about it, Paul, right? Think about what happened in the course of events here. We saw that Red Dead Redemption had won multiple of these. I don't want to use the word smaller because they're not, but it was Best Voice Actor, it was Best Director, it was Best Use of an Art Scene. They won all of those. So, to me personally, everyone's like, well, there you go. 3-4 of them going to Red Dead. Red Dead Redemption 2 is clearly going to be our Game of the Year. And I'm like, no, that almost paves the way for God of War. Right? So when I saw the same thing happening and Kojima going up 2-3 times for different awards, I said, this is going to have I didn't think it, to be honest with you, I would have lost if I was a betting man. I would not. I love Sekiro. Only got about halfway through that game. Shame on me, but that game is fantastic and deserves every bit of that credit. Shout out to Gamer O'Malley real quick in the Super Chat. He says, do you think the Series X reveal got lost in the noise? Cerny dropped PS5 info and trended globally for 2 days. Series X had to compete hype. I think you're saying the complete hype seems to be muted. Thanks, Gamer O'Malley. I appreciate that. I mean, what do you think about that, Paul? Do you think that it was the right time to make that announcement, or was it just like a flash in the pan and now we're moving on?
I think it did more to help the Game Awards than the Game Awards did to help Xbox. Because I do kind of agree with that statement, actually, because it wasn't like a close out the show announcement. Not that it should have been, because it's technically an award show and you wouldn't want to close with like a product trailer. Right. But because it was placed kind of randomly, just, you know, a little ways into the show. And then by the end, I mean, you didn't forget about it, but it's, you know, it was alongside a bunch of other reveals, and there were a million different stories between the new trailers and all the award winners and stuff. So I did think it kind of got lost in the shuffle. I think it probably would have had an entire larger news cycle if they had just done their own reveal stream that was, you know, 20, 30 minutes or something at any random time on any day, because it's a big deal. I'm sure they had their reasons for doing it. But again, I think it lends more credibility to the Game Awards, and the Game Awards got a big boost out of that it's like a big enough event to do that. Whereas I would agree that it did get a little lost in the shuffle. I mean, we're still talking about it now. I mean, I think once the Game Awards stuff faded, then we kind of went back to talking about it because it was the biggest story to come out of the show kind of by far. So it swung back a little that way, and there's still more to be revealed about it. Like we barely saw anything from it, really. We saw like kind of one game and what it looked like, but we need to know the price. There's a bunch of other games to see, so there's still plenty to come. But generally, I would agree with that statement.
So now you made an interesting comment earlier, Paul, and I'm glad you brought it up. You said when Spike TV was hosting it, and it was completely different production, you had gone to one of those. Why have you not gone to one of the recent in the past 4 or 5 years? Does Forbes get an invite to? I would assume Forbes has a seat there. If not, I mean, shame on the Game Awards, right?
I don't know how to get into the voting committee. am friendly with Keeley, and I talk to him on Twitter every so often, but I don't really know the process of getting into that committee. I couldn't go to the show if I want to. I just don't go to that many events because I had to kind of pick and choose, and I find I would rather sit at home kind of, live tweeting an event a lot of times than I would flying to California and doing 2 interviews and flying home. I personally, with the kind of writing I do, I don't find much value in that. There are exceptions. Anytime Bungie invites me to Destiny, I'm on a plane, I'm there. But for larger shows, that's not really my bag. I rarely go to E3, if ever, stuff like that. So I kind of just pick and choose pretty select, smaller things rather than these larger productions.
Well, I appreciate the segue you just gave me, because it's one thing that, listen, I didn't want to, I'm a fan of Destiny. To say that you're a fan is an understatement.
Probably.
Right? To be honest with you, what in all honesty drove you to pick that game? And I didn't even know how, if you could see the topic line below that the audience will see pop up in a second here. of all games, I'm saying, why has Destiny been your primary focus when it comes to the in-depth coverage of a particular game? Is it just that this one rung your bell in the right manner? What was it that, I mean, because you could have picked anything. You really could have picked anything. You could have done the Division. You could have done anything. But let's be honest, right? And Paul, tell me if I'm wrong, but just as much as you are so you're well covered as far as sci-fi, TV shows, subscription-based purchasing, games. Destiny 2 has to be, if not one, it's 1A on your entire portfolio. What drove you to Destiny, and what keeps you enthralled in Destiny? I think the audience needs to hear this because they don't get the lore.
Yeah. I think I've written maybe 400 or 500 Destiny articles, which is by far the most of any individual game by far.
Absolutely.
Number two might be Borderlands or Diablo, something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe Fortnite. But yeah, Destiny, it's a combination of factors. First of all, I enjoy the game. Like there's no way I could write about it this much if I didn't really love it. I would say a counterpoint to that would be like I cover Fortnite a lot because it's popular, but I'm not like ultra enthralled with Fortnite, and I'm not like playing it every spare second I have time to. Whereas Destiny, if there's content to play, I am playing it, and I am mostly putting everything else on the back burner. The second thing is because generally speaking, I have found the community to be pretty great. I think they're one of the better communities out there, and now they're the community managers are a Game Awards winning team of community managers. They took home that award at the show. It can be salty like any community, and people complain about stuff, myself included. But I would say between the readers and like kind of the streamers and YouTubers I've gotten to know, it's just a really, really solid, fun community to be a part of. The third factor is that, quite simply, there is almost always something to talk about, and I cannot really say that with many other games. Like I'm almost doing a daily Borderlands column now, because it's kind of my other loot shooter. There's a lot to talk about in that game too, but I mean Destiny, I realized I think over this past year that I can literally write essentially a daily Destiny column because I never run out of topics to talk about. And like, yeah, sometimes I can get repetitive and sometimes I can be reaching and stuff, but I always, like, when I'm drafting my idea the next day, I always have at least one thing I want to talk about with Destiny based on either new content or old content or what I want to see from the game in the future. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't blame people that have bounced off of it because it is kind of a commitment to keep up with. And that's something Bungie has struggled with.
Yes.
But I think it is also has shaped up to be in kind of the best state it has ever been in. And I have tripled probably my playtime from Destiny 1 at this point with Destiny 2, which is shocking to some people because everyone's like, pining for the glory days of Destiny 1. But I think if you follow this entire journey, you would probably agree that it's in the best state it's ever been. Absolutely. And that just means more stuff to write about. So here we are.
Yeah. Now, one of the last things you wrote about it was it's the I have not gotten on since the latest update. I saw you made a funny tweet today. You said something about like Trader for Xbox getting the update before PlayStation. But one of the latest things in the newest update, if you will, is that you said that you don't miss the old grind. They made a change. Can you describe the change that they made in acquiring loot, or how that is? I haven't, and the reason I'm actually asking as a fan, I haven't dabbled at all in the new update at all. So what is it that has changed as far as your time commitment gathering loot that wasn't there before? Were they able to? How is it that they shrunk that process down?
Yeah. So the thing that they changed, at least for this season, is the power grind, whereas previously, kind of in between seasons, the power cap would go up by 50, and you would spend anywhere from like 2 weeks to 2 months, like doing all these different specific activities in the game to try and get random drops to get your power up. And like sometimes that made sense if you were like trying to gear up and get powerful for a raid or something. But a lot of the times in the seasons, it just felt like you were doing it for no real reason. And this time around, they have a very small power grind. Like the soft cap is just 10 higher than it was last season. So if you're at the cap, I hit the new soft cap in 2 days. just not even trying to hit it. And then if you really want to go hard, you can get 10 more levels just from what they're calling pinnacle activities. So like the raid, Iron Banner, like a dungeon, stuff like that. And that will get you up another 10.
Okay.
But in the seasonal model now, they also have something called an artifact, and that will just give you passive power just through playing over the course of a season. And you can get, 10, 20, 30 power from that just by playing whatever it is you want to play. And then that aspect resets. So what I don't miss is kind of the arbitrary power grind in these shorter 3-month seasons. And it's allowed me to focus on things that I would actually like to be grinding for, like new, titles or things that I specifically want to chase without feeling like I need to drag my numbers up in some very arbitrary way that doesn't really serve me. And like, it's felt like a nice kind of reprieve from that, where I'm able to do more stuff that I want to do rather than feeling
stuff you
like
have
I
to
have
do.
to get my power up just to stay in line.
That's a complete game changer in my personal opinion. That's why when you were writing that, I said, my God, I want to jump back in. But you said it's such a time commitment. And, depending on what you're doing, and that's why I said, Paul, that's part of the reason I asked the question. How did you pick that one game? Myself personally, because of the weekly podcast I do, we discuss all games. And a lot of folks that tune in, they want to actually hear about all the games that have come out in the past week, month, 2 months, etc. So I have taken a step back and started to enjoy more titles instead of dabbling in all of them for such small amount of time. I've picked my favorites and then going through that way and review them that way. That's what you have to do. But I tip my cap to you on Destiny 2 because your allegiance and you're a fan of the game. Let's be honest. Even though you're critical, you're not critical. You're critical of the game.
Yep.
So this is not a love affair by no means. So here's some fun stuff, guys. You guys are in for a treat in the chat. Paul, one of the things that I've noticed you've been, I'm going to use the words anti, okay? And again, I don't even have this as one of my subjects. This will be under a general discussion. But you seem to be against Google Stadia. And okay, now as one of my slogans, I always say, I'm not just a client, I'm also a founder. I am not a super fan by no way, shape, or form am I a super fan. But I wanted to try it out, and I figured for the $129, I got a controller, which it's a good build. You've even seen the reviews, Paul. The controller's a good build. You have it yourself. I think you do.
It's fine.
Right? Yeah. It's a good build. I got the Chromecast. That's got a $40, $50 off-the-shelf value to it. I got Destiny 2 in all its glory, all the DLC, everything all cut up to today. And, then I get the Buddy Pass. You can pick your name and all the other little things. So I thought literally, as far as the consumer goes, I truly feel I got my $120 worth. Listen, I got news for you, Paul. I bought Anthem and I bought Fallout 76. Okay, there's $120 I didn't play much of either. So, right? So I don't feel that bad about getting some hardware here and making things work. I don't. A lot of people are like, no, Mooch, don't go Stadia. Listen, I'm not pro Stadia. But what I'm saying is this to you. I want to pose a question to the great Paul Tassi here. What is, Paul, the difference between xCloud and the excitement with that, and then saying, listen, no matter what we're talking about, whether it's McDonald's and Burger King, Nike, Reebok, okay, I don't care what we're talking about. It doesn't make a difference. Ford, Chevy. If Microsoft's going to go ahead and take off with streaming, they have to have a competitor. They have to. They're not going to have the streaming market cornered. Sony's already said they're going to use Azure. So Sony's not going to be their streaming competitor. Who's it going to be? It's either Amazon, Apple, or Google. Apple's going arcade. They want $5 games. That's what they want. That's fine. They're making out they're doing fine. Google's got YouTube. They've got an infrastructure. They've got a great infrastructure, that being said. Now, what they did was I think they advertised it wrong, Paul. I think they should have called it a beta or early access. Okay, a paid beta. It is what it is. I understand that. I don't see why people are... It seems the industry is crashing down on it. The real launch is sometime in 2020 when it becomes available to everybody. Why
if you have to use the term real launch, I think you've made a mistake already.
So wait, are you saying that this is the launch?
Among many issues, I think they should have launched with the free version because that's one of the core selling points, that you wouldn't have to pay pretty much anything up front, and you could just log into Stadia essentially and stream, some game you pick up for cheap, like instantly. Like I think that would have been a better selling point than starting with just the founders, because now I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal when the free version launches. But that is just one of my many, many, many issues with Stadia.
Well, what? And I know you had it. I read, believe me, Paul. I was tuned into your review. I was tuned into the issues you were having. I didn't have those problems, but that I'm not going to listen. I'm a firm believer, and just because I didn't have the problem, that it's not a problem. Okay, I'm not one of those people. So I don't think my short census makes a difference in the grand scheme of things nationally, okay? Or globally, if you will. So I don't feel that my experience is, I'm not going to use mine as a whole. But all I'm saying to you is this. I want you to just take a step back. Forget the hiccups, the oops. The guy that was on, and I saw you were talking to him back and forth. I don't remember the gentleman's reviewer's name, but he was hitting the space bar, and it took like 2 seconds for the character to jump, right?
From Washington Post,
so that's fine. I believe that the gentleman was having a hard time. I completely get it. But what I'm saying to you is this. If we're going to sit here as people in the gaming industry, okay, and you working for Forbes and doing the due diligence that you're doing, is it that striking or shocking to believe that even if Stadia has unbelievable growing pains, which they're going through, and some of it's their own fault, and then some of the stuff like you're seeing with like the Borderlands 3 release today, right, and not getting
God.
right,
Oh
but some of it's on the I think some of it's on the developers too, but that's me.
Google shouldn't let them put it out. If
Exactly.
It's 2 months
okay. All
behind.
right. Now you're right. Now we're all right. I was going to say there is an exception clause there where if I was the head of Google, I'd say you don't have a full product. We'll see you when you're done. But the problem is, Paul, they're getting hit every day with you don't have enough games. You don't have a portfolio. You don't have this. So now they're almost kind of saying, we'll take what we can get.
That's bad. They shouldn't do that. Okay, so I'm willing to put aside all the tech problems I had and like all the tech problems that everyone else had. I have fixed at least my Chromecast by now. I literally had to move my router and hardwire it directly into it because apparently my mesh Wi-Fi network doesn't play well with Stadia. Fine, that sucks. It wasn't the end of the world, but it did take me a month to figure it out. And like Google didn't even know offhand what was wrong with it, so I had to like research it with them, which is not really something you want to be doing for 3 weeks after product
you do
launches.
not. No,
and like not everyone has a direct line to Google like I did, so I imagine other people have their own issues. I'm willing to put all that aside, and you open this with what's the difference between xCloud and this,
right?
And to me, that is the like xCloud isn't here yet, so I'm kind of I have to make some assumptions about it, but xCloud is different because I at least assume it will be able to, it will use all of your data from your Xbox games. And if you want to play your whatever your Xbox library is on the go,
yes,
you will be taking just your games that you already own and then just streaming them.
Correct.
So that'll transfer all your purchases, your saves, whatever. Secondly, it seems likely that they will somehow package it with Game Pass. And then so if for some, super subscription, you get xCloud with all the Game Pass games on it, that is like, 100 free games or whatever it is for the subscription fee, which might be a little more than Stadia, but it's also, Stadia has 2 free games a month or something, whatever they're doing.
Right.
The biggest problems with Stadia that I see is I just don't know why I would use it in kind of any context, especially when, so like, okay, it's making me rebuy games. So that's not great in theory.
Right.
Because so like, okay, so Borderlands came out. To play Borderlands on Stadia, I already own Borderlands on PC and console. So I'd have to rebuy it again on Stadia. This is me assuming I'm not getting codes. But not only that, I'm not carrying over any of my existing 250 hours.
Right, game saves need to be a player, but that needs to work across all platforms, right?
We're
not
does,
there yet.
But the fact that we're not there yet is a big damper to a system that is just starting out and is trying to sell you on taking your games out on the go. And that's why I think Destiny is one of the only games that works okay on that, because it does have cross save built into it, so you can at least take your existing Destiny folks there. So I think that's a very, very big issue with it right now.
I think, and don't get me wrong, everything you said is absolutely true. I can't rebuttal. I can't even say a but. I do have a however. However, Google is the new kid on the block. They literally are dipping their big toe into the pool, the console gaming pool, for the first time. Whether it be a service or not, they're saying it's a consoleless generation they're entering. But hear me out. We don't know if they're not going to make deals with people. You may get Origins and what Ubisoft has coming and PS Now and other libraries all available on Stadia. They're in infancy right now. And again, I go back to my original comment. Microsoft will not. I can almost guarantee this. Paul, you know this from the business. Microsoft's not going to own streaming. Someone's going to compete. And look at who I said again. Apple, Amazon, Google. None of them have the years of gaming behind them like Microsoft and the libraries. So all three of those major competitors are going to have an uphill battle. So your point is well taken. But to sit here and say that Stadia is dead, well, first of all, if Stadia just exists while they build up their relationships or their library or their first party, it's not really costing Google a lot. They've already got the infrastructure. They're using that for what we're doing right now as we speak, YouTube. So what I'm saying to you is that it's crazy when people say it's dead. It's gone. It can't exist. How can it not? How can it not? It's got to compete. Microsoft has to have a streaming competitor. And if they're getting in now, yes, they're going to get a lot of bumps and bruises and uh-ohs and mistakes. I get it. But who else besides Google is giving Microsoft a run for their money? Nobody.
I mean, Amazon is developing a game streaming service, but you know, who knows?
They're either so here's my thing. So Paul, I'll ride with you with that. If Amazon comes out and they're going to go ahead and compete, they have to come out and do what you just said, what we thought Google would do. They have to have their version of Game Pass, right?
You need Amazon Prime for games.
Right, exactly. So, but I don't know if they're going to do that. You know, they may do the same thing where they launch. Listen, a lot of people, Paul, and I don't remember your stance on this. You can tell me your stance. Remember when everybody was laughing and giggling at the Epic Game Store? You can't take on Steam. That's a moving locomotive. But they did. With what?
Yeah.
A very crappy store, but cheap prices. And devs, they gave devs a cut. They wanted that money. So Google can compete in that world. They could start doing things like that. So if you see what I'm saying here is they've got the infrastructure, they got the technology, they have the money to compete with Microsoft. And now all of a sudden you give them some time to build a first party, maybe buy a couple of teams, build their library up. It doesn't cost them. Right now, while everybody's laughing at them, they're like, it doesn't really cost us. They're laughing, but it doesn't really cost us a lot. We're paying for Phil Harrison and 200 other people. So what? You know? I mean, really, it's Google money, right? We can't sit here and say Microsoft lost their shirt this generation, right? And now we're like, well, they're on the rebound. That's great. I don't see that. I'm just not seeing that. I'm not understanding why people are depicting it, whether it be in the media and just publicly, that it's dead. I think it's a legitimate a competitor to Microsoft streaming.
All right, I'm going to draw the line at legitimate competitor, but I will agree with you that you can't declare it dead. Like, I made a joke on Twitter today where I saw it. Remember Stadia.
I saw it. I said, you saw that. And I read it and I was like, oh, Paul, no.
All right, at least at the current moment, like, no one is talking about it. And then as soon as I said that, what's the first Stadia story that comes out? The fact that Borderlands is shipping a 2-month-old build. So
I'm not defending them. They've got a lot of problems.
I agree that Stadia should be given more time and could potentially turn into something substantial and worthwhile down the road. However, I think that is at least 3, 4, 5 years away, which is like most of the way, through the new console generation. And right now they're kind of competing in a market that doesn't exist. Like you're saying that they're going to compete with xCloud for streaming, but like the way I view xCloud is it's just another like tool in Microsoft's toolkit. Like, xCloud isn't their entire business. They're selling a super powerful box still, and like I've been hearing about how this is the last console generation, there's gonna be no more boxes. We've heard that for like 3 console generations now, and here we are. And so they're gonna have that. They have Game Pass, and then they're gonna have xCloud. Like, it's all something. It's all things that like flow together. Whereas Google is only doing the streaming thing, and they have to build from the ground up to such a degree that it's going to be painful. Like forget even all the cross save stuff. Like it's not even clear. Like they don't have any real first party games yet, and it will probably take at minimum 2 or 3 years to even put out their first party game. And I don't think anyone can have any metric of how good that is going to be. Like just because, Jade Raven's running it, she's good, but like who knows what they're going to put out. It could be awesome. It could be terrible.
I agree.
I would not really expect it to be awesome for some brand new company's, first title on a brand new platform, but we'll see. But I think the second thing right now is like it exists in the space where I can't answer a fundamental question about Stadia. Mm-hmm. Whereas like why would I pick Stadia over over PS5 or over an Xbox to come? Because
this is a viable option for being on the road for portable gaming. Period.
That's such a niche thing though. And like
what about college students?
But you can't carry your until everything gets cross save. Like you can't carry or cross purchase. You have to double buy games, and then you have to double play games. So it doesn't really. It's not very good for like an on the road system unless you're just kind of playing some one off title on the go. And it's not the Switch where you can use it as a home console with like this huge roster of awesome first party games that are must haves. And like it's at this point it doesn't even have all big third party games. Like there's no Call of Duty on Stadia yet. And
right.
It's missing.
But that's the thing. So, all right. So let me play this devil's advocate for you one more time, Paul. Next E3, and when I use this word, I do not mean this in a sinister way at all, but I think Google's going to play dirty. Are they right? So they're not going to listen. Sony did a great job of acquiring certain strikes, certain gear early in the generation in Destiny, and it worked. You can say whatever you want, but it worked. I think Google's going to take not, and I use this example all the time, not like a Grand Theft Auto 6, okay, nothing massive like that. I want to calm expectations, but games like Evil Within 2, right, which didn't do great, but still it's another niche title that people do like to play. I'm going to use a game like that, or Watch Dogs, not Watch Dogs Legion, because of course that is coming to Stadia, but not as an exclusive. I think they're going to go get a game like a Watch Dogs, that type of caliber. I don't mean that game. And I think they're going to make that game. Or maybe you saw this at the Google Stadia first launch announcement. Who was in the front row? Ubisoft. Right there in the front row. They weren't there because they were bored and had tickets. There's maybe an Assassin's Creed goes 3-6 months exclusive to Stadia. These are small things where when you start to say, while we build our library and we build our infrastructure, why would I go buy that game on Stadia? This is what the Epic Game Store faced. How did they do it? They undercut. They made things cheaper. That's how you do it. They may make the game cheaper and only available on Stadia. These are things that worked for the 360 and got them to fight against Sony and brought Microsoft to the forefront, right? These are things that worked for Sony this year where they went out and made deals. They're doing it already with Godfall, okay? They're doing it already with Godfall. You have to have exclusive content. People don't like to hear that these days, but you have to have exclusive content. I think Stadia knows that. Stadia knows that they're not in third place. They're in dead last, okay? It doesn't matter what we're talking about. But I think they're in dead last. I think they need to go out and do a move like that. Do you think something like that starts to turn gamers around and go, you know what? Listen, I'm not pro Stadia, but I've played every Assassin's Creed game since it's come out. I'll buy this one I'm not going to wait. You know the way it is now, Paul. It's what have you done for me lately? Right? Yeah. So you want to play a game. Let me use you for an example. Now, Paul, you're not with Forbes anymore. You're the hardcore gamer that I know. You love Borderlands. Okay, Borderlands 4 comes out, and it's on Stadia first for 3 months. You're buying it on Stadia. There's no way you're waiting 3 months. There's no way. I mean, do I have a point?
You do. I don't know if it's the best plan when you're just starting out to try and annoy gamers into like using your service.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. You're almost leaving like...
I know, and I know this is exactly what Epic did, and that's what people are going to say, and that's what the Epic Game Store did, and they started paying for all these exclusives. I would argue the difference there is that fundamentally the only real difference is like you had to switch to a worse client, but you're still playing on your same PC. Like the game is still running the same way. Whereas, Stadia, you're jumping to a 100% new ecosystem that is not a console. And like, Sony and Microsoft doing this to each other, they're still both consoles. You're still both playing them the same way. Whereas, so like if something's on Stadia, like maybe you are someone who's going to run into technical problems with Stadia or doesn't have the internet cap to stream, 20 gigs an hour for Stadia or whatever is required. So I think Stadia is kind of a different case where they would run into some issues that just like, switching to the Epic Game Store doesn't really create. And like, I'm not saying it's like a bad idea necessarily. Like it's something that will make gamers angry. It may make them angry and still buy it anyway, is that's kind of what gamers do sometimes.
Right.
But
right.
It's, it's kind of a Band-Aid on, a larger problem. And I don't think it would go over well. I'm not going to say it wouldn't work at all, but I think there are some additional complications with it being Stadia that would raise some issues that aren't present in other formats.
No, you pose a good question. Guys, I just want to let you know, I can already see tomorrow's headline from Forbes. Paul Tassi writes, I was anti-Stadia, but Mooch got me to hold on just a little bit longer. Okay, listen, Paul, if you want to write that, I already say go ahead. You can use my name and write. Go ahead,
I'd write about Stadia if it got any page
right?
views.
He's like, I won't get any clicks. Goddamn. No, listen, right? This is so. While I have the Paul here, Paul, honestly, one of the things, one of the first times I got a chance to speak to you on Twitter, it was a Sunday morning. Paul's right off the presses. Paul, you a New York guy or East Coast?
I grew up in Michigan. I lived in New York for 2 years.
Well, you're up early on Sunday. I don't know how the hell, but you were tweeting early. And one of the things Paul had mentioned was if you're a big fan of Walking Dead, tune in tonight. And then me and Paul kind of conversed back and forth, and we got into the whole thing. And we even got Jeffrey Dean Morgan in on the tweet. I was hoping he kind of answered. That would have been Paul's star power, not Mooch's, guys. Calm down. But I gotta tell you, it was a good season, man. And I thought that it really brought us back. Well, you guys may not know this in the chat. I mentioned it early on. If you guys are late to get into the show, is that Paul also covers an absolute ton of Sci-Fi TV, which that's how I classify it, anyways. But one of his big write-ups all the time is The Walking Dead, and he did a great piece not only on this season, but he did a great piece on the Walking Dead series that are going to be starting, I believe, in early 2020. Paul, I believe you said we're going to get about 348 days of Walking Dead, which I'm okay with personally, even though I completely agree with you. Fear was a complete disaster. But, outstanding job by Jeffrey Dean Morgan this season, and I like how they took a bunch of characters that I didn't necessarily care about after we lost Carl and we lost Rick. Spoilers, folks. We lost a lot, right? If you're not paying attention, come on. But we lost a lot of key players, and I felt like before this season started in October that unfortunately I was going to start to lose a little faith. And and this is why maybe I put you on a pedestal, Paul. You kind of brought me back into it with your articles, and you kind of got me hyped. You're like, whether you liked it or not, or you felt, and I'm paraphrasing, you didn't say this, whether you liked it or not, or it wasn't your cup of tea, this season will bring Walking Dead back to life or something of that nature. And what was it that you saw? Because you get early viewing somehow, I'm assuming. What is it that you saw this season that was irking me and apparently you from the past two seasons?
I would say this kind of all started in season 9 when Angela Kang took over as showrunner from Scott Gimple, and I have been a big fan of the show ever since season 9 and through season 10. Here we're halfway through now. I think one thing Kang is excellent at in her writing team is taking characters, kind of like you said, and whether they're neglected characters or side characters or new characters, and making them interesting in their own right and kind of redeeming them. I think she's done that with Daryl really well the past year and a half so far, where Daryl pretty much did nothing but sit around and grunt
right
for a couple of years there. But now he's, I always wondered, like, okay, how's he going to take this leadership role when Rick leaves? Because he doesn't say anything, but they've turned him, and he's not, they haven't totally changed his personality or anything, but they give him actual lines.
Right.
And like, he has like kind of a love interest, and like, he's a character. He's not just like a cardboard cutout anymore.
Something to follow.
I think they've done that. Yeah. And like, they've really done interesting things with Negan this season.
Yes.
I don't think Negan was like the problem with the Negan war. It was just him in conjunction with all the other kind of missteps of that season, and then him maybe being a little too over the top and too like the comics. And I think they've kind of brought him back, grounded him a little bit more, and made him he's more interesting as like this, prisoner turncoat than he is a warlord, I think. So
yes,
and then it's just better structured, better shot. The Whispers are a very good enemy compared to the big armies of people we've gotten in the past. They're from the source material, so they've had to do some work there, adapting them. But I think they've done a great job, and
absolutely
doing all of this despite losing so many huge people. Rick, Carl, Maggie. I mean, Maggie's coming back, but that is no small feat, and they have pulled it off. And I don't know, the show's not experiencing some grand ratings resurgence or anything, but AMC loves it enough to commit to it for the next
I think it's got a dedicated, it's got a very dedicated audience, though, Paul. I understand where we're not seeing the spikes we saw in seasons 4 probably through 6, but to be honest with you, it's got that allegiance. Shout out to Biggie 2316. He says, Paul, here's 10 for that headline. They really want to see that, Paul. So if you don't mind, again, I'll sign anything I have to. Sure. Yeah, that being what do you see going forward as we get into February when we go back to it? Negan, and again, spoiler guys, I apologize, but I got to talk to Paul about this. Negan kind of turned himself into the Whispers at the end of the October session here. And to me personally, this seems like this is old school Negan coming through. Negan is, if anything, he wants to take over that group or he wants to sabotage the Whispers. I don't see him truly joining Alpha. Let's be honest. You see Negan, he's not going to start to eat mealworms and sleep in the dirt for the next 20 years, right? That's just not Negan. So where do you see they're going to do you have any non-spoilers or things you're able to talk about, or just your opinion on, do you think that he's going to kind of be an internal bomb for the Whispers and that helps Alexandria and those folks, or do you think he's going to join them?
I mean, I have spoilers just in the sense that I've read the comics, but I won't comment on what happens there. I will just say, based on what the show has been setting up, it seems pretty unlikely to me that Negan is is genuinely turned into Whispers. So
right.
I think either you're right and he wants to take over and lead the group and turn them into something less gross, or he wants to, finish his redemption arc and help Rick's group in some way by, bringing them down from the inside in one way or the other. So
very similar to how, oh God, now let me draw a blank. I can picture, God, the love affair with Rosita, long hair, Eugene. Thank you. I don't know. I was thinking Eli for some reason. That's because great Eli Manning had a great game, but we're not going to talk sports. Sports on the show doesn't go well. But yeah, Eugene,
I can't talk sports.
Right? Eugene had that moment at the end of the Negan War, right? And where he was.
But that plot line always bothered me though, because he really converted to being bad and to just saving his own skin. That was.
But you got to though, right, Paul? You've got to. I mean, if you're in there, it takes one slip under the old Saviors slogan, you'd be out in a second.
Right, but he wasn't even just doing it to get along. He was I'm going to get power. I get access to bonus food, and I get to hang out with women and whatever. He was enjoying it. It wasn't even just I'm just trying to survive.
That's true.
And then he helped him in the end, but I don't think that was his long-term plan. I just thought that was his way. It was his way of coming back. Whereas Negan, I'm not convinced that this wasn't a plan Negan had from the start to, know he can ingratiate himself with the group. I don't know if there's any sense of Negan genuinely wanting to join the Saviors. That just doesn't really make sense.
It's actually a good point. So, no, you're right. And it's a difference, but I mean, I was kind of using that correlation of him being an implant that exploded on Negan. They didn't see that coming. And here Negan is with the Whispers. All it would take him to do is kind of talk this person into not believing Alpha, and he's already got some kind of a grudge going against Beta.
With Beta, yeah. So I mean, I think Negan wants to live in Alexandria, or the Hilltop, or the community, but I think he realizes he's going to have to do something pretty significant in order to not be in jail when he comes back.
Yes,
and get to live as a normal person. So that if he has a plan, that would be my guess. That's his plan.
Well, I don't have a ton of time with you, Paul, but I do want to go over one more thing with you, and that's the Disney Plus model and what's going on. And, again, I read so many things that you actually publish and put out. I do want to know your feelings on this. I enjoyed the last 2 episodes of The Mandalorian, but a lot of people in the business, and I'm not saying you, but a lot of people in the business are starting to say that it's jumping the shark because they're just not grasping the essence of what they should be doing with this, if you will, modern day Boba Fett character. They're just, he's hiding Baby Yoda. He's going, it's almost like, Paul, if this was you, please tell me. I've read so many different articles on it now where they're like, well, ship breaks down, Mandalorian lands, gets ship fixed, fetch quest, fetch.
Me.
Right? That was you, right? You called it a video game. You called it a video game miniseries. Do you think it can rebound, or is this thing is this already in trouble?
I don't think it's in trouble. I don't think it's bad. I just it's not being quite what I was hoping it would be, I guess. And I am generally not a fan of procedural shows. Like, here's your arc for this episode.
Right.
Someone's in a jam, gotta get out of the jam. And especially I think The Mandalorian is taking that format very, very literally, where it's usually something like his ship is broken and then he meets X new person that he must solve X problem with, and then he leaves. And then the process, that's been like 4 or 5 episodes now.
Right.
And like those episodes are well done. Like they're really well done. It's just that I was hoping for a little more. And like people are comparing it to like a Clone Wars or something. But there's like 22 episodes of Clone Wars a year, and there's 8 of The Mandalorian, and they're shorter episodes. So it just when you start with something as like significant as like, hey, here's Baby Yoda, which is a very important reveal in the Star Wars universe, and then it just becomes like hide the Baby Yoda for 5 weeks. Like that's I just wish like I haven't been able to predict, what the few episodes have been like. And like we're getting at the end, and maybe that's going to change. And maybe I'm sure the season will end with some sort of significant cliffhanger to some degree. But like, people are comparing it like, oh, it's like Xena, it's like Hercules. Like I get that, but like those are also pretty dated shows, and that format isn't really.
It doesn't hold everyone's attention anymore these days. Yeah.
Yeah. And people are like, oh, like TV has ruined us now. Like we can't just enjoy a show because we can't podcast about all the 5 different plot lines running through it every week. And it's like, that's a stupid critique, because like TV is better than it's ever been, because we have all these like really in-depth, really high quality, like, very cool shows. Like I don't really understand how that's a critique. I think the Mandalorian can exist the way it is because it's still enjoyable to watch. It just might not be what people kind of thought it was going in if it sticks to this format.
Well, it's also,
I think it'll evolve, but
Disney Plus gave us quite the library, but at the same time, if you're looking for new content, the reason I think The Mandalorian's getting the critique it's getting is because it's the only show in town, really. I mean, Jeff Goldblum doing an in-depth miniseries every week on sneakers and ice cream doesn't necessarily hold our attention, right? I mean, I'm a big fan of Jeff Goldblum. Who the heck doesn't like Jeff Goldblum? But I mean, that's not enough. So all eyes are on The Mandalorian, and they're short episodes too, Paul. Someone told me today, well, Mooch, you can't really be that critical on The Mandalorian for being 35 minutes. It's movie production quality. And I said, well, I mean, yeah, the action scenes are great, but a lot of it is just acting in and they're in a regular set, so I don't know if that really holds water. I was a little, the one thing, my biggest grief would be that we're hitting these small, desolate areas. Listen, Paul, you nailed it. So Paul gets full credit here. If this was a report, I'd have to cite Paul Tassi. It really is. It's like a video game. It's a mission, small mission, fetch quest, fix ship on the next planet. That being said, it's also, it's only 35 minutes long, each one, or 30 minutes. I feel like if they were an hour and they got a little bit more into character depth, maybe that would help the show a little bit. I don't know. Personally, I think it needs something, but all eyes are on Mandalorian, and hence why I think it's getting kind of that rough treatment, if you will, from some of the critics.
Yeah, the length caught me off guard at first because like you never see shows like this that are this long at this point. Like I think episode 2 was 27 minutes, which is just it's wild. And like the longest episode is 35.
Right.
I grew to not really mind that because I'm every other show I watch on like streaming services, like I'll watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and that's like a 58-minute episode for 10 weeks or something. And like it's all these shows being that long get a little exhausting. So I don't really mind there being, some shorter episodes. I think every episode being that long is slightly weird. Like I thought it was just going to be like, oh, it's a flexibility thing. Like,
right.
If he's got an arc that lasts this long, but it seems like there's a pretty hard limit of 35 minutes, and that it seems odd. And I do agree with you that if, they add an extra 10 minutes, like that could be where you flesh out, the larger plot line a little more in some way.
Right.
Because we just haven't really seen that for a couple of weeks now. And the fact that it's only 8 episodes, I mean, that's like 4 hours a year. I mean, technically that's like the length of 2 movies. So, and Star Wars has done more with less, but it is striking me a little odd to combine all these things, to combine short episodes, short season, and these like hyper-focused short storylines. And I think that's where some of the disconnect is.
I can't really say it's rushed. I mean, you have Jon Favreau writing some of this stuff. So, I mean, they got big names. They've got people. The production quality is fantastic. And shout out to Mighty Ragnarok in the chat. He says, damn, people whine about everything. Mandalorian's great. I don't think me and Paul are saying it's not a good show. I'm just, there's just a couple of things. I'll remember it was the 3rd episode in or so, and I turned to my wife, and I was like, I'm like, it's over already? I thought he was getting in the ship. We were going somewhere. What happened? And like you said, Baby Yoda did that big scene in, was it episode 3? I think that was episode 3, right? Where he was talking to the Jawas, and he had to some of his.
That was episode 2.
Was that 2? And where Baby Yoda showed his strength, and we, like you just said, we haven't really seen anything since. So, I mean, myself personally,
he almost used the Force last week.
Yes, he almost did. And then, I won't spoil it because, I mean, that did just come out. But watch it. Baby Yoda comes really close to being something special in this one again.
One problem I have is that they're not, like, it's pretty obvious what the overarching storyline should be. Like, he's got to go find the guy and kill him who's issuing all the bounties. Like, or else this is never going to stop. But, like, they haven't talked about that. Like, they don't show him like trying to track the guy. Like he just seems to be like landing in random places, either because the ship's broken or because he needs money to do a job. Like if there's no real master plan being talked about, even if it seems kind of obvious what the master plan needs to be at this point.
Right. No, I completely agree. And I want to say this much. I want to say, Paul, I want to say thanks for being here tonight. To be honest with you, I've kept you here for well over an hour and a half. I don't remember. Sometimes I tell all the guests, I'm like, just be about an hour. And then I just keep them a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's fine.
But, Paul, you're going to be invited again onto Crossfire. That's a podcast that I do on Friday nights. I think it would be great to have you with my usual suspects, my panel, big-time gaming fans, also big-time fans of all things sci-fi. So you'd be right at home. I want to say thanks to the great chat as well. Thanks to Longshot316 for becoming a member. Biggie, a bunch of you guys that all were just fantastic. Elemental PO, thank you so much, guys, for the super chats. Outstanding work. Paul, your work is fantastic. I don't know if you've been able to see the screen, but I've made sure that I've put everything up there a bunch of times so everybody can find you. But do me a favor, Paul. Let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and on any kind of Forbes website. I put what I found up on screen, but let people know where they can find you because they need to know.
Yeah. My Twitter is just at Paul Tassi. I don't even know my own URL for Forbes. If you Google my name, I'll show up. Like there's not that many people have my name. So you can find my Forbes site through that. And then I wrote a couple books on Amazon if you wanted to check those out. So you can just search for my name on Amazon and I'll have some books there. Just
in case you're wondering, folks, it's called Hero Killer and it is fantastic. Paul,
that's my new one. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I was actually going to have you, if by all means, please do plug the book. It's been fantastic having you on. And, I reached out to you. Me and you were just BSing one day on Twitter about Walking Dead. Then I asked you a couple questions about games. And then I said, hey, Paul, would you be available to come on one time and do a one-on-one? And he says, yeah, sure. So, Paul, to be honest with you, you've got a lot of reach. You know a lot of people. Like you just said, you're tweeting Jeff Keighley. You know, the Mooch can't do that. But nonetheless, I hope you'll come back on the show soon. We'd like to have you on Crossfire, but we'll wait till the new year. We'll wait. Take some time. We're all going to enjoy our time with our families. But I will be. The Mooch is great at asking over and over again. So hopefully we'll get you on a Crossfire in the near future.
Sorry, I wanted to try and do Crossfire. I ended up being out for that Friday. So yeah, I definitely want to on a different day.
Absolutely, but we'll definitely get you on there. I want to say thanks to everybody again, and thank you to Gadang775, Sully, who did some of the artwork for me here tonight. I appreciate that. And I'll be putting all the artists, Paul, also attributing your artwork as well. I'm going to add it to the description after the show. That being said, guys, we'll see you Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time for Crossfire. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll catch you later.